with practice, you'll learn how to do it without straining or doing anything like that. And you can just leave your hand just like this, normal. And I got my break under 2, okay?
Hey YouTube. So I really want to introduce you to a good friend of mine, but before I do, I need to give you some context. So let me show you something. It's called a pinky count. It's millimeters. It's a tiny amount of space. And yet within that small space lies one of the most useful moves in all of card magic, because you can use it for so many different things. Multiple lifts and turnovers, estimation, memorized deck work, false steals, all of it. And yet for all its utility, it's actually pretty easy to describe. I could do it in a couple of concise sentences. You ready? Bevel the deck against the base of the thumb and then put downward pressure with the tip of the thumb and the tip of the pinky while stabilizing the deck with the index finger and the middle finger, but allow your ring finger to wrap across the top of the deck to keep the cards from popping up as you riffle down the side of the deck with the pinky until you can catch a pinky break underneath the number of cards you were looking for. That was ridiculous. But it's not that the pinky count is difficult inherently. It's not even that it's complex. The issue is that it is so very easy to do poorly. For such a tiny move, it's been explored by some of the best minds in card magic. In fact, there's still a bit of a debate about who it is that deserves the credit for having come up with it in its modern form. There are many who would agree that the credit belongs to Ed Marlo, because back in 1945 he released a pamphlet called Off the Top, and in there he has a concept called the one-hand side count, which conceptually speaking sounds like the pinky count. But though conceptually it's really close to the pinky count that we know and love today, it was very different in both form and function. He changed the form in terms of the hand position and the finger that was used, but also the intention of it wasn't to count through all the cards. It was to get a break underneath 2 cards. His original thought was an efficient get ready to do a one-handed double turnover. And even then he admits to the fact that that idea was derived from something that he learned from a book that was published 5 years earlier. The book was Expert Card Technique, printed back in 1940. And the move that Marlo was referring to was the author's version of a simplified get ready, a way to catch a break underneath 2 cards in order to execute a double turnover. They talked about beveling the deck and then squeezing the short ends of the deck with the top hand, allowing those top cards to bow. And then the bottom hand would allow those cards to pass off the fingertips until you could catch a break under 2 cards. We've actually been over this on this channel, and I'll put a link to that video right up there. So, if we're gonna give credit for counting down the side of the deck in a secret fashion to catch a break, we gotta start with Gene Hugard and Frederick Browie. They were the first ones to put it in print. But if we're talking about doing it one-handed in the way that we currently do, we gotta blast back to 1959 with Ed Marlo when he releases his magnum opus on false deals, seconds, centers, and bottoms. In that work, he has something called an off-the-face second deal, where he talks about the pinky count that is largely in the form that we know today. He talks about how his contemporaries started to use their pinky instead of their ring finger in order to catch a break underneath the cards that mattered to them. And he felt that he was adding 2 things to the equation. Number 1, he was changing the form to something more natural, from this position to that position. The other thing that he felt he was adding was a difference in function. Most people were catching a break in order to do a multiple card turnover, usually a double lift. But he was going to use it to do a false deal. But even still, it's not the main feature. It's still a get ready. So I think we can safely say that Marlo deserves the credit for the notes, but not the music of what the pinky count is today. For the music, we have to turn to a guy named James Starrenko. Starrenko is a really interesting character. He was born in 1938 in Pennsylvania, and unlike most of the biographies that I give you, he's still alive. He's 82 and has an active Twitter account. And even with over 80 years of existence under his belt, you would still be amazed at the number of professions this guy has held in his long life. You ready for this guy's resume? Here we go. Close-up magician, illusionist, escape artist, sideshow circus performer, competitive gymnast, band member, producer, philanthropist, graphic artist, comic book artist, one of America's foremost comic book historians, and to cap it all off, concept artist for movies like Bram Stoker's Dracula and Raiders of the Lost Ark. That's right, Starrenko is the reason that Indiana Jones looks like he does. Now, somewhere in the midst of that man's chaotic existence, he manages to write and release his one and only magic book to the world in 1960, 1 year after Marlo releases his magnum opus on false dealing. That book is appropriately named Starrenko on Cards. This book is considered a classic of card magic and is still produced in hardback to this day for that reason. But here's the annoying bit. This book was originally published in 1960. Starrenko was born in 1938, which means that somewhere between being a sideshow circus performer and starting his own band, Starrenko managed to write a magic book that has stood the test of time for more than 6 decades. If you ever got the inkling that you're an overachiever, how about them apples? And after all of that, we finally come to the reason why it is that Starrenko, I think, deserves all the credit in the world for the pinky count as we know it today. When he describes it in his book, he describes it in much the same way that Marlo did in his manuscript, but here's the major difference. When Marlo described it, it was an add-on. It was a convenient aspect to get to another move. It was little more than a get-ready. When Starrenko describes it, it's an integral part of an effect, of a small routine, which means that Starrenko took the pinky count from being an aspect to an object. Now, the pinky count was a utility move unto itself, and we could explore it for everything that it had to offer from then on. Now, I would love nothing more than to teach you this beautiful utility move that has become so useful to me and countless others over the years. There's one problem though. I hate my pinky count. I don't like the way it looks, I don't like the way it feels, and honestly, if you're going to learn it properly, I feel like you should learn it from someone who does it far better than me. So now I think is a really good time to introduce you to my friend, David Malek. David is easily one of the most intriguing individuals that I've ever come to know, full stop, let alone in the world of magic. But if you went looking for his work, you wouldn't find very much out there. 2 books and 1 DVD. The thing is though, in this time that I've known him, he has been one of the most gifted card technicians that I've ever learned from. It's one of the main reasons why I wanted him to be the one to teach you how to do the pinky count properly. But he's also kind of a renaissance man, much like Starrenko. He does a lot of things very well. He's a very gifted chef and restaurateur. He is one of the best dressed men in magic and honestly one of my go-to references for men's fashion. He is one of the most well-read and educated people I've ever sat across the table from, and amidst all of that, one of the most entertaining performers that I've ever gotten to see. He bounces pretty easily between comedy and gambling and magic and has created one of the most unforgettable characters that I've ever watched, His Majesty the King. So, without any further ado, I think it's time you meet His Highness, Mr. David Malek.
I think one of the, if not the greatest utility move in card magic has to be the pinky count. It first appeared in print in Starrenko on cards, another excellent artist, and I really mean an artist, Starrenko. And of course, I encountered it in Darwin Ortiz at the card table. It's a utility move that allows you to get a break under any number of cards that you want. But there's a few things about it that we need to discuss in order to make your experience with it easier than just reading it out of a book. Number 1, the cards should be beveled like this so that your pinky can rest on them. Instead of doing it straight down, this would be very, very difficult to do. They need to be beveled like this. So you do that by pushing the left side of the base of your thumb, or the right side of the base of your thumb, into the left side of the cards. So you have this. Now, the index finger is curled across the top. The thumb, the pinky, and these 2 fingers, the second finger and the third finger, float above the deck. They don't go under. Some people do this, which is ridiculous. Some people do a pinky count where you see the cards, they hold the fingers like this, because it's very, very difficult to hold that ring finger just above the deck, all right? So that's the hand position. Next, you have to push down with your thumb and push down with your pinky in order to create a fulcrum here. So what's going to end up happening is these cards are going to spring up, okay? And the only way that they can do that is by creating tension. Now, you pull down with the pinky, which it takes a little bit of strength. You're going to build strength in your pinky. At least that's what I've been told. I don't know. I just do it. I've done it for so many years. It just comes naturally to me. Push down with your thumb, index finger here. The second and third fingers are floating above, and you slowly pull down with the pinky, just like this. When you get your break, or when you get to the numbers that you need, you get your break just like that. All right? So now, why learn this? Well, I want to get a break. I'm talking to somebody, and I want to get a break under the top 3 cards. Done. I want to get a break. I'm standing like this. I'm seated now, but let's say I was standing, and I need to get a break because my hands are in this position. I can get a break. I can count. From this side, you can't see me going for a break. From this side, even if I do it, even from this side, let's say that I do this, right? You really can't see that too well, but I can always turn my hand this way if I feel as if you're gonna be able to see me. And I can just do that. If there's somebody sitting, for example, right here, I can always just turn my hand over and do it like this. Obviously, if you're in this position, you can't see anything, and no one's gonna be seeing it from this position either. Now, a lot of people give up on this move before they master it because they think it's too hard. But remember, the alternative is to push 2 cards across like this and then come back and get your break. That's a piss poor reason not to learn how to do this particular utility move. Look how easy it is. Done. And no movement. There shouldn't be any tension. With practice, you'll learn how to do it without straining or doing anything like that. And you can just leave your hand just like this, normal. And I got my break under 2, okay? The most people, 99.9999% of you guys out there won't need to count down more than 3 cards. Most tricks, you're not gonna need to do that at all. So learning to just very lightly count underneath 3 cards is child's play. So how do you go about learning this particular utility move? Well, it's counterintuitive. A lot of people think that if you start learning with a small packet of cards like this, that it's going to be easier. In reality, that's not the case. The greatest analogy I can give you is, for example, learning how to do a pass with 60 or 65 cards, or using 60 or 65 cards and trying to learn how to do the bottom deal. If you learn how to do the bottom deal or the pass with a large group of cards, when you shrink them down to a regular size deck, it becomes a lot easier. The same is the case with the pinky count. You need to develop strength in your hand in order to be able to do it. Put the cards in the hand, get a break under the top 3 cards by counting down. That's your first practice, is to count down 3 cards. Your second practice is going to be count down 3 cards again. I'll show you what I mean in a second. Then you count down 4, and finally 5 cards. So the first 3 are this one and these 2. You get a break on the top 3. Cut 1, cut 2, then you count under 3, then you count 4, and then you count 5. And that's how you practice. Once you've gotten to the point where you can count 1 to 5 reasonably easily and with a consistency, then you can go up to a larger number. For example, you want to try your hand at 6, 8, 10. Sometimes what'll end up happening is you'll grab an extra one and you won't know it, or you might think that you did. If you think that you did, drop the break and go back again, all right? It's not worth it trying to cut off what you think may be 15 cards and finding out that it's 16 or 18, and that's going to happen to you. This is one of those things that's going to take a lot of time, but if you're sitting on the couch watching television, you've got plenty of time to do it. It's also probably the best time that you'll ever spend learning a utility move for card magic. The time that I've spent learning the pinky count has served me quite well over the last 30 years. Anyway, I hope you enjoy your time with it. Spend some time, learn it, and you'll be glad that you did. It's been my pleasure. Have a wonderful day.
And there you go. That is the pinky count as taught to you by His Majesty the King, Mr. David Malek. See what I mean? Super intriguing guy. Now, this is just the first in a series of things that I want to do with David on this channel for you. And due to time constraints, we had to expand our timeline. But luckily, I was able to do an interview with him where we talk about his history, his influences, and how he developed his very unique performance style. So if you want to check that out, I'll leave a link in the description below, and I hope that you guys take the time to watch it. While you're down there, I'll also put a link to his website, doublegeorge.com. This is where you can find David's published work, from his Magic books, The Ultimate 10-Card Poker Deal and The Dream Card Revisited, to his gambling protection work on poker called Cheating at Hold'em. He also sells his custom gaff decks, which if you're into gambling protection, you will find very interesting. Anyway, I hope you guys check that out too. In the meantime, I'll see you guys soon.